Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, Monday evening edition. Part 2 of building a box tubing style bead roller. In case you haven't seen it, I did a 6-part series in the last couple weeks where I built a 40-inch depth violin style bead roller. And now, last Saturday, I decided while I had all the parts laying around, I could forever store them, or I could just take the time here and there in the next few days and just knock out another one. And that's what I'm doing. So on Saturday's video, I had cut my stock. I had made blocks for the lower box, pressed in the bushings, and that's about as far as I've gotten, other than engineering in my head. So since then, I cut my lower shaft. Might as well go into detail. The upper and lower shafts are going to be the same length. The front portion, 1.5 inches deep, is 22 millimeter OD that matches the inexpensive dies. I machined a flat for the set screw that comes with the dies. Also tapped the end, M10 1.5. to retain the die as well. My buddy asked me why I didn't just tap it 3/8, 16 or whatever. Because that piece is metric and I just kept it that way. Because, in bead roller terms, this is a 22 millimeter bead roller. What that means is where the die goes on to 22 millimeter and the shafts are 2 inches apart, or 50 millimeters, I believe. So there I go, swapping back and forth. So I wanted them to stick out 4 inches, which I did, giving me a total, as advertised, of 30 inches on the money. So using a 3/8 end mill, right there, for the shaft collars, I just touch down so the set screw fits right in a hole. And in this case, if you can see it, I'm also using one on the back because I needed the spacing for the upper gear to have room to slide without running into the bead roller itself. And while I was doing this just a minute ago, I realized when I was getting the set screws out, I have to bore the gears out to 1 inch. They come 3/4. And I have to drill and tap for the set screw, which is 5/16. I had short ones and I had long ones, and I put a long one in it because I don't use them very often, and I can see now that the gear runs into it, so I have to go get the short one. So that's why you pre-assemble stuff. So that's what I did on the lower. The very rear section right here sticking out, I cut the flat for the gear and the drive system, my Woodward Fab drive motor system. And once again, for this, I just touch down with my end mill. I like the way it fits that way. It's really secure, but these are fine with just a flat. Again, a 1 inch shaft all the way through, but the Woodward Fab, the Eastwood Fab, all those bead rollers that take the 22 millimeter dies, most of them don't have a 1 inch shaft. It's actually 985 thousandths. So I have to take just a hair off, 15 thousandths, off the shaft so the coupler fits. So the last 1 inch, I did just that. And I did that ahead of time. I actually did it from memory. I figured worst case scenario, I could just take the upper shaft and remachine it. But this afternoon, I removed the Woodward drive roller system off the bead roller, and the coupler fit perfect. So the lower, it spins nice. It's actually beautiful. There's no stress because I haven't welded anything, and all the welding I'm going to do is back here. And if I'm really careful, I don't think I'll have any warpage problem, and that's the way it should spin. This isn't even oiled yet, so super happy about that. I will be welding the spacer on first, setting my gear mesh, and that'll be welded complete, and then I'm going to plate the outside, and I'll keep checking it for flexibility, see how much I have to add. And I will continue to weld on steel till it weighs about 200 pounds and doesn't flex anymore. It's the upper box, an upper shaft where things are going to get interesting. I have only seen pictures of how I think the upper shaft operates, and it's not that difficult. And I've done some laying out this afternoon. I just never got around yet to putting this in the mill and making a few cuts on it. For starters, I need to cut out from here up on the bottom, because the upper shaft block, which this mechanism is going to be, actually drops right out of the tubing a little ways. That's normal on any bead roller. The upper shaft, depending on where it's positioned, actually has to hang down. So if I didn't cut the bottom out, it would never go down far enough. So that's no big deal. I'm going to drill a hole. Well, I'm going to talk about all the pieces, and I hope it makes sense when I'm done. I'm going to drill a hole here. This will be where my adjuster mechanism sits. Now, unlike my other bead roller where I had the bottom of this adjuster captive, and when you screw this up and down, there's a handle on here, it picked the shaft up and down. That would be possible if I could somehow cut a T-slot and have some kind of mechanism. And I'm pretty sure that's not how theirs are done. So I found this actual screw piece on McMaster car. It has a snap-on swivel foot. Now, all your bead rollers that you buy, the cheaper ones anyway, the shaft just pushes into the block. I mean, it's not a high RPM rig, but this is total overkill. But I saw this cute little snap-on thing after I weld the bung that I just made. Could hold my glove. I weld the bung on here. I can thread it down through, snap the foot on. It'll just, cruise that much easier, and then I'm going to make a handle that I will weld on the top. So that was a couple bucks, and I thought that was pretty cool. And I'll include the part number when I'm done, the little threaded bung I just made. It was actually a mistake. This piece I had left over from one of the shafts, so that was easy enough. Now the spring, seeing as how this is not captive on the front block to lift the shaft up and down, how the other ones are built, I believe they just have a pin holding a spring, and the spring has a rod or something welded here so the spring can actually slide. The spring still hangs up and down. I suppose it could bend if it wants to, but allowing the shaft to move but still have spring action to pull the shaft back up. I've decided to do it slightly different. Another threaded bung I just made, that'll be welded to this shaft holder, and I'll get to this piece in a minute. So this will be inside the box tubing. On top will be my spring setup, and I'm actually just going to have a piece of threaded rod and a nylock nut up here so you can set it for pressure, kind of like your well regulator or a blow-off valve on an intake manifold, something like that. So this will pull the shaft back up. I'm going to have a slotted hole in the top of the bead roller, and this can just slide with this box underneath. It's not great pressure. I'll smooth that up and make sure that it only has to travel 3/4 of an inch either direction. And I went ahead and made it 3/8 so I can actually, these handles here will be what locks the rear block. We haven't got that far, but they'll be back here. And when I loosen those, I'll be able to grab one of those and that, and I can actually shove it. You can grab the bead roller dies themselves. You could pinch your fingers. I think I'm safer back here, so that's my plan anyway. Again, I haven't obviously tried it yet, so it should be interesting. Excuse the junk here on the bench. So back here will be an 1.5-inch slotted hole as well for my adjusters, and these are kind of cool. Also McMaster car, you can pull out on them, and you can put the handle any way you want. So when I'm done, I can have them straight up and down or sideways or wherever I want them. It doesn't affect how tight it is because that's an internal piece. It'll lock anywhere 360 degrees around. So those are pretty cool. Again, not a lot of money. I was going to just use a bolt and weld a handle on it, but I spoiled myself. I want it to look nice when it's done, so be it. So 1.5-inch slots on either side back here, which I'll also have to duplicate in the plates that I'm putting for reinforcement. So I'll slot this first, make it work, and then I'll transfer those holes onto my plate and slot an 1.5" slot there too. And also the spring slot will be 1.5" as well. So these will stop the upper shaft from going too far or the gear to crash into the body. The slot will actually do more than just slide. It'll be a stop on either end. The rear block will be just like the lower ones, with the exception of, being deep enough to have, 3/8 threaded hole on either side. The lower shaft, I locked it in with 5/16, but I had room for 3/8 if I bored it all the way through. And I'll drill and tap them, make some spacers, and that's a piece of cake. So that's what's going to lock the rear. And when the rear gears are aligned, the dies will be aligned. But in the front, I needed something to allow it to slide and still be square, because if I put something round in there, that's not going to have any, square seemed to be the way to go, but I needed to get to round for the shaft in the middle, so under the bench I went, found a bunch of scrap. This is, if you're looking for dimensions, 1.5" box tubing, and I'll actually need to weld a couple beads on either side and then mill it down so it actually slides nice without right now it has some side-to-side movement inside the box tubing. So I'll do that when I'm getting ready to put it in. But the fun part for me, I knew I couldn't use the oilite bushings that I used in the other 3 positions because there's no room, because this is going to go inside this box tubing, and I'm going to rosette weld it in. So this will be, inside the tubing and sticking out on either end. I was going to buy, and that was going to hold me up today, I was going to order from McMaster Car probably, some 1/16 thick, 1" ID bushings. So yesterday I was preparing the tube. I found this piece of tube that's going to press inside here, no problem. Like I say, then I'm going to rosette weld it. And I machined, this was slightly less than 1" ID, so I drilled it with a 1" drill to start with, and then I had my boring bar out. And I was boring all the way through it because I didn't want it rubbing on the shaft. I should get the shaft. I had built the upper shaft as far as cutting it to length. It's the same length as the bottom shaft. And I've cut the 1.5" here, 22mm, and I've drilled and tapped it M10 1.5. But I needed some mechanism to let this slide on my shaft. Again, my box tube will be around it. It'll sit in the bead roller frame. Both the spring, this piece of the spring is going to be welded to here inside, and the threaded rod will go up through, and the spring mechanism is going to sit on top. That's how it's going to go up and down. And my force down will just be pushing on here with the little foot that comes with the swivel foot, so that'll work well, I think. But I got thinking about it. What do I work on all the time that has 1" bushings? Turbo 400 transmission. These are stator bushings or sun tube bushings. I got thinking about it, so I got about, I don't know how many, quite a few. All I had to do was counterbore in a 1/2 inch or the width of the bushing, press them in. Had to do some light honing because I squished them a little bit putting them in, but now it's perfect. And when I weld it inside of the box tubing, I'm going to drill a hole in the top, and I'll be able to look right in the bead roller at this, and I'm just going to have a hole I can drip oil in. I'm going to pack it with grease when I build it, which will probably last my lifetime as it is, but I want a way to oil it properly because these are not oilite bushings. They're just brass bushings, or bronze, I guess. It's more than one type of metal. It's more like an engine bearing, but it probably needs some lube, so I will pack it with grease when I build it, after I weld it all up, obviously, when I assemble it for the final time. And then I'll have a hole where I can I could put a grease fitting in it too, but it's probably overthinking it, because I could take it apart in seconds and re-grease it if I had to, So that's my plan anyway. I'll just have a hole that I can drip oil into. I could even put an access hole in the top if I wanted to. I might do that too. I can put my squirt gun right in there with oil, grease in it, my oil can, and that'll service the front. So that was the only complicated part. See, the rear is just another block like I made. Instead of being bolted solid, it'll be able to slide. And I've got the front figured out. So now tomorrow I will cut the features into the upper box tubing and set my gear mesh, and I'll be welding it together, so the next time you see it, it will be in one piece. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with for a stand yet. I ended up with a second Woodward Fab stand, which I'm not really in love with, but I have it, and what am I ever going to do with it? It's all made and it has a tree to hold extra dies. I'll probably use it, and I will put it on wheels, or I'll build another stand, which was the funnest part of the other project, and it rolls really nice, and it's probably worth the effort. So that's up in the air. I don't know what I'm going to do there. You may notice I didn't just move it to another part of the shop. The Woodward Fab Super Bead is gone. I took the drive motor off it this morning for this, and sold it to a buddy of mine. So I converted it back to hand crank. It's really cute. I wish I'd taken a picture of it. You can imagine. But you take off the motor that's that long, and it's kind of a handy little size. I've gotten used to these gargantuan rollers, and perhaps a hand drive is all you need. Well, it doesn't work when they're this big. So enough rambling tonight. I'm going to get recharged, and hopefully you get most of this done tomorrow in between everything else. It's, again, a project I wasn't counting on, but I'm committed at this point. If I just threw all the parts on the bench, they'd get lost, or I put them away. This way it will be complete. And either way, if you count all your days in your life, at some point I was going to put 2 or 3 days into this thing. I might as well just do it now. So hopefully I can continue the process of working on stuff to its completion. I do that for other people, but for myself, I keep adding projects. So. And I'm okay with that. Like I say, when I finish all these projects, I will need more projects. That's what keeps me sane. I hope you're sane and have a great day. And catch you later.